Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you, as always, for watching, for listening, following, subscribing. I do appreciate you all. Before we get into today's episode, want to let you guys know that this Saturday, July 20th, all day long, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Western New York's Heroes Event Center, 1001 East Delavan Avenue. First ever Mafia Con. This is a Del recreation here. Food trucks, vendors, beer, tailgate experience, media personalities, Bills player appearances and autograph opportunities, including Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, Terrell Bernard, and Dorian Williams. Also live podcast there all day long, including this one. I'll be on live there from 3:15 to 4 p.m., and I'll be joined by special guest Tim Graham of The Athletic. All proceeds are benefiting the Punt Foundation and Western New York Heroes, Inc. $20 get you in the door. Well worth it for a very good cause. Visit BuffaloMafiaCon.com for tickets. I'll put a link as well in the show notes to this episode. On that note, I want to bring in my recurring guest here for the Tuesday show, Anthony Marino, my guy. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Nice, enjoyable weekend. Beautiful weather in Buffalo for minus a quick little 10-minute rainstorm on Sunday afternoon, but man, can't ask for more. Good weather. My favorite beer tent of the year was this weekend in West Seneca, Queen of Heaven. Went there with a bunch of friends. Had myself a really good time, man. I had a friend in from out of town in Texas. Good weekend, man. How about you?
Yeah, well, based on your social media, it looked like you were having a good time. So I was glad to see, and that's great. And honestly, too, I mean, I know you just went through the information, but everything for MafiaCon, that sounds like a fantastic event, and I'm glad they got you out there with Tim Graham. That's fantastic.
Tim's one of the best, man. I'm looking forward to that. In fact, when Dell asked me to do the show, literally the first thing I thought of was like, well, I got to get a good guest because I sure as shit ain't gonna do it myself. And Tim was like literally the first person that I thought of. He'll be a lot of fun. I'll tell you, well, I can't promote somebody when I don't know who's going to be on the show, but I will say this in terms of this podcast. One of those Buffalo Bills players that I mentioned will be on the show for like maybe 10, 15 minutes as well. I just don't know who. They got it set up so that Dell's got it set up so that whoever it is that's signing during that time and they're going to finish up, they're just going to jump right on the show with me and Tim. So yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I'm very much looking forward to it. Plus it's for a really good cause, for charity too. Brian Moorman's Punt Foundation is always a top cause here in Buffalo. What do you want to talk about today? Dude, we were talking for like 30 seconds here before we started rolling the cameras. And this has been a tough, I don't want to say tough off season, but a tough couple weeks because this was the first season that this show went 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And during the season, we're talking about this. That's easy. You could have a 7-day-a-week show during Buffalo Bills season, during NFL season, and even some parts of the off season. But once that draft comes or OTAs and mini camps, and you got this like dead time before camp, boy, oh boy, man, it gets hard. And I don't care if you got 5 days or even just 2 days a week. It can be a little tricky to come up with content that you feel like people want to hear about or see.
Well, but you think even compared to last season, I mean, you could talk about the Stefon Diggs situation daily. I mean, it seemed like for those in sports talk radio and the podcast side of things, I mean, that was a recurring theme. This year, it's not. So I realize it's a bit more difficult, but I'd take this situation over that, like the constant speculation and what's going on and what's he posting on social media. Like now it can just be looking forward. It might not be as exciting or as sexy, but that's okay.
You know what? You bring up a great point there. Like last season or most off seasons recently in Buffalo have kind of been speculation. The off seasons of speculation. This off season was for better or for worse, we'll find out. And kind of that's sort of like what the theme of today's episode is going to be about. But one thing's for certain is that things have changed. The game has changed when it comes to the makeup of this football team, the roster, the personnel of this team. This was an offseason of actual change. What I want to talk about today, because training camp is now like pretty much a week away. And I will preface, like always, when I have Anthony on, at least when we tape during this time, we're recording this Monday morning for a Tuesday morning drop, or overnight drop, I should say. So some crazy happens. You know what? We need to talk about it. That's why, because we're taping this early, which, by the way, reminds me, yesterday's show, Monday's show, I had Joe from Queens on, which, I mean, you know, Joe, a little bit of a hothead. And we recorded that actually on Friday. And thank God, because we recorded it on Friday because, like I said, I had friends coming in for the weekend. And I don't want to get in this with you, and I know you don't want to talk about this either. But what happened Saturday night at the Trump rally? Had we waited to record the normal time, I don't know that I would have been able to get an episode in with Joe with some of the rants that he would have had based off of that. So kind of glad we taped that ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Joe brings his own flair to the
that's
show.
What you want to call it.
You know, regardless of all of that, right? Like,
yeah,
what happened? That's a travesty. Like that should not happen in any 100%. Way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
and it's you know, it's crazy to think that, you know, it's something in this day and age of just like as things continue to happen and always happen, and it's really a sad state of things because
absolutely.
You know what, when these things happen, then it becomes the conversation goes in so many different directions and so many different agendas where it shouldn't, right? Because it's like no matter where you find yourself, like that should not be a situation where people are put in that place. And, you know, and again, a Buffalo native lost his life, you know, being there, protecting and shielding his daughter.
Yeah.
And I realize most of the conversation, of course, is going to be around the former president, and that's understandable based on the profile of things. But it just, you know, just kind of another senseless act. And here we are again, where I feel like you have this same conversation over and over. And it just
well said, dude. Well said. So we're clear too. My laughing was at Joe and how he would have been just completely impossible to contain on a sports podcast. There's absolutely nothing funny whatsoever about what happened. And yeah, that's sad. And the reactions predictably are sad. You know, take a side, still kind of that deal. It's really sad to see. But on a better note, let's talk football here. Is talking Buffalo. I want to talk today about what I think are at least a handful of like training camp mysteries. I feel like some things we kind of already got a good picture of. We already know. So today I kind of want to focus on a handful of training camp mysteries, things that we don't know how they're going to play out, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they play out. And I want to start with a guy that, I mean, you and I talk about him to some extent, but we haven't really talked about him a lot, even though he's a high profile new addition to this team. And that's actually Keon Coleman. Like, to me, a big mystery for Keon Coleman for this season, and we'll start to hopefully see some signs of it starting next week at training camp. But what role is Keon Coleman going to play for the Buffalo Bills as a rookie this year? I think Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel are the only two sure things in this receiver room right now. Like they're going to construct two of those top three receiver positions. I feel like for sure. You could see MVS ahead of Keon Coleman early on his rookie year. Hell, you might even see Matt Collins taking some reps from him early on to start this year. I kind of feel like I would call anything like over 500, 550 receiving yards for Keon Coleman as a rookie a good year. Now, I know there's a lot of people that will disagree about that, maybe you as well, but kind of feel like that's a little bit of a mystery right now because he's a second-round pick, a receiver. We don't really know what kind of role he's going to have this year with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I think almost even the mystery is less about him, and it's just the receiving core as a whole. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, you do away with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, and okay, that's understandable, but it's not like it's not like just Gabriel Davis left and you're bringing in one person to, in
Right.
essence, replace him type of thing. Like there's a lot of new faces. And with Keon Coleman, it's like, yeah, right. I mean, you win the press conference, you're the darling of the offseason. Everyone is excited. The one thing I can guarantee you is no matter what he does, people are going to overreact. Right. So if he gets off to a slow start, people are going to freak out. And if he comes, in week 1 and catches a 50-yard bomb for a touchdown, people are going to be, annoying him right away. But I think with a lot of the situation, it's just like, listen, here's a guy that was the 7th, 8th receiver, taken in the draft. Like, I think he's going to have an opportunity. I think he's going to play. I think they'll probably get a little bit creative with him to get the ball in his hands and see what he can do as a rookie. But, kind of along those same lines, I think if you set the over under at like 600 yards for him, I think that would be safe. And I think that's okay. And if, obviously if he comes a little under, if he goes a little over, like I think that being a target as a rookie, I think it's okay with that because they're going to spread the ball around. That's going to happen. And, I think he'll do some things that will really flash. I mean, he just turned 21 years old, right? So people will look at it and say, as long as it's showing that potential and some consistency, I think you'll be okay. And I think he'll show more consistency than a Gabriel Davis. Like, they're different players, but I think that will go a long way as far as like, again, maybe being a little bit more steady with what he does each week, as opposed to some of the boomer busts that we've seen.
What's funny too is when you talk about people are going to overreact, whether he plays well or whether he doesn't early on. It's funny because like I consider myself among that top tier of overreactors, meaning I overreact right up there with people the most. Me, Nate, and a couple others. But here's the thing: when it comes to Keon Coleman, I don't think if he starts slow, I don't think I'm going to overreact much because I don't have a lot of expectations for him early on. And that is not me saying that I don't think Keon Coleman's good. Keon Coleman, I think, could end up being, a great receiver for the Buffalo Bills in the NFL. I just feel like the way this roster is constructed, the balance of the offense, some of these veteran, I don't know, I guess to some extent, maybe journeyman wide receivers, I just have a hunch that I feel like he's going to be brought along a little bit more slowly, which is, like I said, it's a good training camp mystery to me. Let me ask you this too. I usually don't fall for clips of football players working out or how they look in a t-shirt and shorts at OTAs and minicamp when there's no physicality whatsoever going on. But I know you've seen them. Keon Coleman with some of these workout videos, I'm impressed. You impressed? I mean, he certainly looks the part right now. Watching these videos of him getting that work in and his route running, it seems like he's gotten better in just 2 or 3 months based on what clips we're seeing.
You know what? I look at this. When I say I'm not impressed of anyone doing those. Keon Coleman, Stephon Diggs. Hey, if I see the pictures and like the video clip of like, all right, hey, at Vanderbilt, there's all the wide receivers and pass catchers and Josh Allen and the quarterbacks are there. That's the type of stuff that impresses me because it's like, hey, they're putting in the time together. That's great. Some of those things that are a little bit more produced, it's like, I don't know, when there's some graphics added and it's like sped up a little or slowed down and like, hey, it's all good to see. I appreciate that the guys are putting in the work, but I'm not going to get too excited about it. And going back to the point with Coleman too, I think we're part of the expectations have come more in check. It was the signing of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, right? Yeah. Because really before that, and even, I mean, to a lesser extent, you can say Chase Claypool, but it was you draft Keon Coleman. He's that one guy that brings you a size element. Well, then after the fact, hey, you sign a Chase Claypool. That's cool. You bring in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I mean, granted, they're different receivers, right? But he brings a height element, right? A height and speed. There's just only so many snaps to go around how things will play out. So I do feel like the expectations being in check, it's kind of a good thing.
Let's I want to shelf receivers for a second because we're actually going to come back to them in a handful of minutes here. Let's move on to the next one. And that is, and I think this is going to be a big mystery. What Von Miller are we getting? What Von Miller is left? We'll start to see it at camp. If you're the optimistic person right now, you're like, he looked pretty good in the playoffs, at least compared to what he looked like in the regular season. I maintain that I thought he was the best edge rusher this team had against the Chiefs, which again, the bar was really low for that game. But we saw some signs. He looks, again, going back to the clips. I know you just literally said 10 seconds ago you're not impressed by clips, but because they can be orchestrated, but he certainly looks better in clips. We've seen some of him working out, doing some pass rushing moves. So are we going to get the Von Miller that is closer to who they had in 2022 when they signed him in that first, what was it, 9-10 games or whatever it was leading up to Thanksgiving, where he was producing and looked good before tearing the ACL? Or are we going to see a guy who came back too early last year, whether that's on him, whether that's on the organization, whoever that may be, but a guy who was a complete and utter shell of himself last year that looked completely cooked, washed up, whatever term that you want to use to see Vaughn? That's a mystery going into camp, one that hopefully we will start to get some perspective on by how he looks relatively early in the camp.
This is going to sound like I'm riding the fence, but I'm not, because it's going to be somewhere in between the two, right? And I say that because when he went down, he was arguably playing, he was at a Pro Bowl level. I don't know, I don't want to go as far as saying it an all-pro level, right? But he was on pace to probably have somewhere between 12 and 15 sacks on the season. He looked good. So, am I saying he's going to be back at that point? Well, no. That's a complete stretch based on what we saw last season. But I also think with Von Miller, for as much as he talks and different things that he says, I think he's using some of, and there was the Sports Illustrated interview, he's using some of this as motivation, right? Of just like, okay, I came back too early. I shouldn't even have been out there. I hear what people are saying. That's making me angry. I just want to get back to the player I was before. Okay. Listen, all these guys, you can say, oh, you're a professional athlete. You get paid. You don't need these little things to get motivated. These guys will take whatever little slight they can get to push them. And if for Von Miller, that's the type of piece that says everybody thinks I'm washed or everyone thinks like this or came back too soon, and that's pushing him to be better. All right. Like, I'm not expecting him to be the player that he was before, right? Maybe he's playing 35 to 40% of the snaps, right? And is more of that third rusher piece, maybe more of a third down specialist. But if he gets 5 or 6 sacks on the season, comes up in some big spots and shows that, like, hey, if it's 3rd and long, you talk about, right, his performance against the Chiefs in the playoffs, where it's like his experience, where he can kind of kick it up a notch, I will be really happy with that. And I know that might not match what his contract is or what the Bills signed at this point, but it is what it is. So I would happily take that.
Let me give you a bonus Von Miller camp mystery, because we're kind of sticking with camp right now. I think it's going to be a mystery what kind of reaction he gets from fans. Am I being unreasonable if I say to you or to the audience right now that I think Von Miller might be one of the least star Bills ever in terms of popularity with fans right now? Is that too much of a reach? Because I'll say this, look, big money. Some of the stuff's not his fault, but he gets a huge contract. Okay. So you got that factor. You got the factor in social media. Dude I've never seen someone who's more wrong about things in my life than Von Miller. Like, it's almost like a running joke right now. If Von Miller predicts something that's going to happen, shit ain't happening. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is with Von Miller, the injury, coming back to her. Well, we'll get to coming back, but just not playing well last year. I don't really blame him for what he said this offseason, but, he felt like he come back too early. The same guy who was quoted as saying he hopes to be there for week 1 last season. I'm sure he's got some pull and influence being who he is with the organization. And then that's not to mention the obvious, the off the field stuff last year too, that has turned a lot of fans off. Like, so if I tell you, you know what, I think Von Miller might actually be one of the most unpopular star players this organization has had. Do you agree with that? Do you think I'm being a little bit unreasonable? A lot unreasonable?
I don't know. That's a tough one, right? Because the excitement from when he was signed to the excitement that first season to then post-injury, the off the field allegations. I mean, I guess to an extent, like the predictions, I feel like that bothers some people more than others, like, the Odell Beckham Jr. stuff and this and
I've
that.
had fun with it, but he is terrible with predictions.
Yeah, but but I can get where some people it annoys them, and that part I'm fine. I tend to think with and this is Bills fans, any fan, right? Like if he comes out week 1 and sacks Kyler Murray, he will be just as popular as he was before the injury. So right. I think there's that piece to it, which is part of it. So right, like come and have that flash, and hey, if you come out and you play like you did last year, well then it's warranted.
Sure. Quick little bit of Monday morning minor news anyway. The Bills are playing the Steelers, I think, in the preseason, and they just announced through a memo that they're going to have a couple joint practices that week with the Steelers leading up to the game. So that should be pretty cool. Going back to Von Miller real quick, let me ask you a question. If you were, and this is not a camp mystery, so again, kind of a little bit of a sidebar here, but if you were a general manager of this team, if Anthony Marino was a general manager of this team, and let's just say for the sake of discussion, the contract was structured differently, where essentially, because, Brandon Beane was essentially stuck with Von Miller right now, but let's just say he had a contract, like say Jordan Poyer, where you could have actually saved money by cutting him, or even if you don't save money, you're not necessarily losing a ton of money. But if all things were equal and the contract was equal, do you think Von Miller would even be back this year? Or do you think Von Miller is back 100% exclusively because his contract just financially wasn't feasible to get out from this year?
No, I think that's a good question. Yeah, I think if he had a Jordan Poyer contract or a Mitch Morris contract or maybe even a Tre'Davious White, I think that's fair to say that they probably would have moved on. This was probably a situation where they, that's a tougher pill to swallow based on the financials and the hit they would have taken with him, and based on just some of the other pieces that they did. But, I think it's safe to say that they would have, right? That based on his age and based on the play on the field last year. I mean, the one thing that is different with him than all of those others, you can bank a little bit on a bounce back here because of the recovery, right? Sure. Where you can look at someone like again, right? You use Jordan Poyer of like, hey, we love you. You're just not the same player that you used to be. Granted, he was always playing banged up in different pieces, but not coming back from that type of injury where you can say, okay, with more time, we will see more improvement. But no, I think that's a fair question.
As we head to a quick break, I'll leave you with this take regarding Von Miller. If you want to be optimistic about projecting him for this year, we saw Trey White come back and he was not ready to play in 2022, but in 2023 through camp and through the first month of the season, Trey White, if he wasn't 100% of that all-pro player he was 95% of it. He was moving around great. He was playing well. He's making plays. He looked like the old, again, all-pro caliber Trey White until he got hurt late in the Miami game in week 4. So if you want to be optimistic and hopeful about Von Miller being now, more than a full year removed from it, you could have hope that you might see, again, you're not going to see Denver 2015, 2016 right. Von Miller. That guy's gone. But you might see 2022, early 2022 Von Miller. And if you could get that, I think that would be a fantastic addition to this roster this coming season. Anyway, I'll take a quick break, come back. A couple more of these Bills camp mysteries I want to get into, including one featuring a guy that we just talked about a couple weeks ago or so, talking about him having like almost a Buffalo Bills all-time season. And now I got him as a camp mystery. So we'll get right into that after this quick break. All right, I am back here with Anthony Marino. We are talking Bills camp mysteries, training camp getting started next week. I am actually really excited for camp. I hope to be in Rochester for at least half these practices. But anyway, last week on the show, Anth, I had one of your favorites, a partner of yours from Buffalo Rumblings, Bruce Nolan, who's back with the Bruce exclusive. By the way, I'm happy. I'm so happy he's back. He's one of my favorite dudes. He is one of the absolute best podcasters that you'll find anywhere. A combination of you're going to learn something when you listen to Bruce, and I can't even say listen or watch because he refuses to do any video stuff, but you're going to learn something from Bruce and you're going to be entertained by something from Bruce. His knowledge of the game, his ability to articulate it to fans is second to none. His creativity, though, goes under the radar as one of the low-key strong points of Bruce Nolan. I know you were entertained by his musical intro to his comeback podcast, and I'm sure you're happy as well that he's back.
Yes. I mean, listen, it is, and I think in many ways he talked about this with you. Like, Bruce was one, he never wanted to take a week off, right? I mean, he felt an obligation where it's like, listen, if I say I'm going to do this, if people are enjoying the show in whatever way, like he really, and again, we would have conversations when we were working closely together. I mean, I think there was one year he was like on vacation and I'm like just basically like working as a board op for him to like kick things off because he just felt that strongly about just, I need to do this. And it shows based on the content that he does, right? Because you talk about it as well. Like, during the season, you can talk about the Bills every day. Take the storyline of the week, talk about the opponent. Like, it is hard to differentiate yourself in what you're doing. And he is certainly able to do that, right? I mean, just to go through and he can take the most mundane topic or question and put a twist on it that I couldn't, you couldn't, nobody really could, right? And to do it with a charisma, I guess, is just it's really special, and it's just great to have him back because I think in especially this time of the off season when you just need some relative something to smile about and positivity around the team and what he brings. It's just great to have him back, and it's great to see the reception that he's gotten from everyone.
Dude, he went to number 4 on the Apple Podcast football charts. I mean, come on. I talk shit and brag and throw up a photo when I get up in the top 200. Your boy was number 4. It just says a lot about not just him, but about a lot, the fans and how much they missed him. And to your point, and I've said this before too, quickly here, I've learned a lot from Bruce as well. Even though I've been doing his podcast longer than Bruce has been doing his, I've learned from him. And one of those things is the consistency. Now, he just does a show once a week on Thursdays, but he does not miss that show. Thanksgiving, Christmas, it don't matter what the holiday is, what the occasion. I learned from him that your fans, your audience expects something on that day, and it's your job to deliver. I kind of kept that model. Like I said, when I went on a cruise in February, I knew I was going on a cruise. I pre-taped some stuff so that every single day while I was gone, I still had a show. So I've learned a lot from Bruce. And by the way, I'm totally pandering to Bruce. There you go, Joe from Queens. But I kind of bring up Bruce for a specific reason because it leads to one of my Bills camp mysteries here that I didn't realize might be a mystery, but now I'm thinking it might be. When he was on my show, we were talking about James Cook. And is he going to be a workhorse featured back? Now, again, last month, you and I had a show that I threw some notes at you. I said, yo, can James Cook run for 1,500 yards this year? And I didn't think that was absolutely crazy. It's unlikely, but not crazy. After I talked to Bruce, I'm wondering now if James Cook will even be like the workhorse back on this football team. Bruce referred last year to the Bills when Joe Brady became offensive coordinator, the perception is that James Cook really flourished and took off. And to a lot of extent, that's true. But he also mentioned that Latavius Murray kind of fell off a cliff last year, late in the season. We all kind of saw him fall off last year. And then Damian Harris was hurt. Like, what would James Cook's role have been for the Bills last year if either A, Latavius Murray is not quite as old and he doesn't fall off, or B, if Damian Harris doesn't get hurt? James Cook's never been that bell cow running back, not even at Georgia. He was averaging like 12, 13 carries a game. So I think a camp mystery is James Cook was 4th in the NFL in rushing last year. But is he going to be the guy, or are we going to kind of seem like maybe a little situational, almost committee type here with the Bills? What do you think?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, even last year it was a committee. And I say that because Josh Allen is your quarterback.
Sure.
Right. So a lot of times, and I listen, when we talk about running backs, there's those of us that have conversations of like this, we're a fan of this team. Then there's the inevitable fantasy football side of the conversation when people talk about, a James Cook and who he is and what he can do. And, I think along these same lines, you see with more and more teams, like they need that secondary back. You just have to have it. It can't be all the eggs in one basket. I mean, heck, you'd even see it with the Titans and Derrick Henry, where it would just be like, okay, they had added depth to the team and sort of reducing some of the load for him, but to give that different look. So the team adding Ray Davis, I think, right, it gives you that younger version, hopefully more durable, right, of Damian Harris or of Latavius Murray and what he can bring to the table. Now, I think when you talk about the production that you'll see from James Cook, yeah, I expect him to be even in, let's just say, like the top 8 rushers in football, because he's going to get the touches. He's good enough. He's electric. He can burst some things, but he is traditionally going to be that inside the 20s running back. And then I think once they get into the red zone, you're not going to see much of him, right? Like maybe that's where you see more of a Ray Davis or obviously Josh Allen making plays with his feet. And, your quarterback rushed for 15 touchdowns last year. I mean, that's like insane when you think about it. So I think James Cook is going to be that player that they will still get in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 touches a game. I'd like to see him catch the ball out of the backfield more. And I'm not addressing the drops. I'm talking about targets, right? Like kind of giving that flexibility even in the play action type of game. But yeah, I see him being that main guy, but let's be honest, he's going into year 3. So let's see what you got with Ray Davis kind of being that 25%, of the rotation or the touches when it comes to your running back, because in 2 seasons, I don't anticipate them giving James Cook a big contract. And hopefully that's when you have Ray Davis ready to go and you kind of just repeat this type of cycle.
It's worth noting too that there's not a lot of teams in the league that have that workhorse bell cow running back. So James Cook, he'd finish in the top 5 to 8, 5 to 10 in the league and still be like at least a semi-committee, because there's a lot of football teams around the league that are kind of implementing the same. I'll tell you too, another thing that Bruce brought up, a comparison of sorts that kind of got me thinking, is Ray Davis. And he said he thinks that he will be what they hoped Zach Moss would be for the Bills. Now, Zach Moss has went on to do some really good things since leaving the Bills. But I could see that. I could see Ray Davis kind of having that Zach Moss between the tackles, catching some balls out of the backfield, going to him a lot, kind of like that Latavius Murray. But now, instead of a guy who just didn't have any real, juice left in the tank, you got a young guy in Ray Davis. I could potentially see a 63-37 kind of split between these two guys. I probably should mention Ty Johnson too, because he's pretty damn good and nobody talks about Ty Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Ray Davis, I'm optimistic for. Ty Johnson, I like what the Bills have in their running back room right now. And I do think James Cook will have a highly productive season once again. He's probably just not going to be that red zone, touchdown producer that if you're a fantasy owner that you're looking for. He's probably going to be in that 5 or 6 neighborhood, and Josh Allen's going to get a bunch, and Ray Davis will be a goal line type of back, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast in Buffalo.
Yeah, it's funny too, because James Cook could be really good this year, but not a great necessarily fantasy football value, because Josh Allen just takes away all of the touchdowns. I agree with you when it comes to James Cook. That said, I am, again, looking for, you can only see so much at camp, but maybe the bigger mystery is how active or where Ray Davis will slot in before camp is over. Like, can he surpass Ty Johnson as that 2, or is Ray Davis going to start the year as just maybe that 3rd running back? That'll be something worth monitoring.
I would say yes, right? Because to that, I think you bring in a Ray Davis because he is different than what you have. Ty Johnson, I almost look like, if something were to happen to James Cook, he brings you more of that type of dynamic to the field. A little shiftier, a little smaller, catch the ball out of the backfield, kind of, knife your way through and kind of slither into, some spots where Ray Davis is going to be more of the Zach Moss, Latavius Murray, initiate some contact and kind of move the line.
For sure. Look, I mean, I just said it in passing. I do think Ty Johnson is good, and I thought he looked really, really good in the back half of last year when Joe Brady took over, when he had opportunity. So highly confident in this running back room, regardless of who's out there. All right, a couple more of these. I think a big Bills camp mystery is starting to see if Kaiir Elam can salvage his Buffalo Bills career. As of now, we go into camp next week, and Kaiir Elam is your outside CB3 boundary corner for now. He's had 2 years, he's on the verge of being a bust. I mean, it is what it is. You're a first-round pick, and if you don't produce, that's what they're going to throw at you, a bust, whether it's fair or not. If he looks good, great. That's awesome. If he doesn't, I think Brandon Beane is going to look at the trade market or the waiver wire and get a veteran in here that maybe he could trust a little more. I feel like there's going to be a few players on this roster, even though I think there's almost no chance that he can win a starting job, no matter how good he looks. But I feel like there's only a few guys on this roster where the eyes will be on somebody stronger than they are with Kaiir Elam.
Last week I was a guest on the UK Bills Backers podcast. My buddies Matt and Robin always jump on with them a couple times a year, and we talked for a while about Kaiir Elam. I will just be transparent. I am biased in that I like Kaiir Elam. I think he has been a good teammate. I think he has taken accountability for things like the game in London last year and speaking to the media and standing up and not shying away from, what some players do, right? They'll just kind of slink out of the locker room after they have a tough go of it. So I'm rooting for him to be successful. And it has nothing to do with oh God, the team is desperate to have this former first round draft pick deliver. Christian Benford has filled the spot. Rasul Douglas is on the roster. They're good with their starters. So it's not, that point of oh gosh, this needs to happen. Kind of like Terrell Bernard last year. Good gosh, somebody needs to step up. He's been accountable. He's worked hard. I think he brings the right attitude. So just as a fan, I'm rooting for the young man to make it. Now, obviously, if somebody goes down, right, being that third cornerback is definitely going to be critical. And I've talked before, Bobby Babich coming in, it's okay, new defensive coordinator. You've got a new defensive backs coach, a little bit of not a little bit, it's a clean slate. Babich has announced that it has, and it just, I'm here for it. So when we talk about that potential that he has, I'm just rooting for the guy. And I hope that it, ends well for him and he proves to be a valuable piece of the team.
He's one of the more weird. I'll say he's not weird. There's nothing weird about Kaiir Elam, but it's one of the more weirder situations of this entire Sean McDermott regime. I feel like what I've seen from Kaiir Elam, because I could cite some situations where I see the guy make plays. I've said this a couple times and I'll say it again. I'm going back to that Bengals playoff game a couple of years ago where the Bengals kicked their ass, and Matt Milano and Kaiir Elam were the only 2 guys on defense I felt like even showed up when you go back and you watch the All-22. You go to last year in the playoffs. He has an interception against the Steelers. He's seized the moment at times and made some plays. Now, he was god-awful in London against Jacksonville, so I get the criticism there, and I've seen him at camp last year, which is kind of, again, a mystery camp last year, because he would look amazing one day and then he would look awful the next, getting yelled at. You could see that he was either not lining up right or just missing assignments, getting called for what would have been, defensive holding or pass interference. I don't know. I like your point, though. I like where you're going with Bobby Babich being the defensive coordinator now, that maybe that will spark something. Confidence, maybe his confidence is there. Maybe mentally he's there. Maybe he wasn't there the first couple of years. I also will be rooting for him. That said, if I'm Brandon Beane, I am in my office and I am definitely looking at alternatives if he doesn't work out. You cannot go into a season with Jamarcus Ingram being your primary backup, I feel like, anyway, if something were to happen to Christian Benford or to Rasul Douglas.
But listen, we have seen the team make moves in the past. We have seen Levi Wallace become a bona fide starter in the NFL. We've seen Dane Jackson play to a level. I mean, right, that he's getting a $6.5, $7 million a year contract now in Carolina. That I don't want to make it sound like just, hey, you can throw anyone back there, but whether it's the scheme, the system, the coaching, I don't know what it is, but they've always given that level of confidence, even when there has been injuries that they've had to work through. The defensive backfield has not fallen off a cliff where all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, the Bills secondary is one of the worst in football. And, they're getting thrown 400 yards against them each and every week. So I think I have a little bit more confidence just based on that to be able to say, heck, even if it is Jamarcus Ingram, like I've seen crazier things. So just,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just
right.
too much of the rose-colored glasses, but
no, you're right.
A little bit optimistic about it.
No, you're right. I mean, you would think I'd learned my lesson with the Terrell Bernard from last year, or Christian Benford too, a 6th-round pick, and look what he became. Ain't nobody thought anything of Christian Benford before we saw what he did on the field. So maybe I should not be so quick to be dismissive. If it were to be Jamarcus Ingram who ends up getting pressed into action, I probably should not be so quick to pull that trigger and say that he's not going to be able to get the job done. Kind of want to swing back here to the receivers for a few minutes. This might be the biggest mystery of camp. I mean, who the hell emerges between Chase Claypool and Shorter and Hamler, Andy Isabella, hell, maybe even Shavers for one roster spot, possibly two if they keep 7. I mean, your top 3 are. And then you got MVS and Hollins, 4 or 5, whatever way that you want to, throw that out there. But you're going to keep 6 for sure, maybe 7. Lots of candidates. That's going to be, look, how James Cook looks at practice in camp. Who gives a shit? You know what James Cook is going to be. You know what most of these guys are going to be. These guys are going to be kind of fighting for their lives, making this roster. Every practice is going to be big for them. That's going to be a fun mystery to see unfold. Like, who emerges from this group?
There is nothing that screams Buffalo Bills training camp storylines like the amount of attention that is going to be paid to the competition for the number 6 wide receiver. It is going to be the story of training camp. It will dominate podcasts and airwaves to be who is the 6th wide receiver. And it's, probably one of those, if we're being smart, it's like, who cares? It probably doesn't make a difference, right? If it's KJ Hamler or Chase Claypool or Justin Shorter or whoever it may be, right? Like, because as a 6 wide receiver, you're probably not even getting a jersey on game day, right? Like, you're probably going to end up being inactive unless you end up filling the niche of, kick returner. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. But with that being said, it'll be something really fun to follow, right? As much as I'm sitting here saying like we shouldn't care and we're going to spend too much time on it. That's what training camp is for. And, we've been here long enough that you think to the years of David Nelson and Donald Jones and Stevie Johnson and literally getting these diamonds in the rough that can come and produce in the NFL. And in Stevie Johnson's case, right? I mean, be a bona fide star wide receiver. So, you can look at it and say to yourself, like, gosh, you got Claypool, you got Isabella, you got Hamler. These guys were all 2nd-round picks for a reason not too long ago. What does that look like? You look at Chase Claypool, it's like, okay, his first 2 seasons, this guy showed that he is a legitimate starting wide receiver with what he was able to do in Pittsburgh. So there's enough reasons there to have some fun with it, right? It's not the back in the day of the, can an undrafted free agent, Robert Foster, can he be something great? Like, no, there's some pedigree here, which makes it kind of fun.
That is fun too, because 3 of those guys that we mentioned, Claypool, Hamler, Isabella, they are all 2nd-round picks. It's not like there's some, no-name scrubs who are trying to stay in the NFL. And then Justin Shorter's a guy who he's a mystery in himself. He's a 5th-round pick just a year ago. I thought he looked pretty good early, got hurt in camp and then didn't play at all last year. if I had to make a bet right now, okay, and you're right, and let's just assume if there's no injuries at camp, and obviously you knock on wood, you certainly hope there is no injuries at camp, major injuries. But let's say they keep 6, not 7, and you know who the top 5 are. If I was going to force you to take a $20 bill out of the Marino wallet right now, and you're going to bet on who that 6th receiver is, Claypool, Shorter, Hamler, Isabella, somebody else. Who's that 6th receiver right now? Who you bet on?
Chase Claypool. And I say that because he is shown to be the most talented out of the bunch, right? Okay. His first 2 seasons in Pittsburgh, he produced. Then the different changes, getting traded to Chicago, the time then in Miami, but this is a guy that has been a 800 plus, 900 plus yard receiver in his first two years. Probably has the greatest potential. Somebody like Andy Isabella, okay, as much as we wanted to say that last year, didn't show enough, right? Like, got a jersey, maybe 1 game, got 1 target on the season. KJ Hamler would probably be my second choice based on the speed factor and his inability to stay healthy. But hey, can you put together a healthy training camp to your question? But I think Claypool, it's all things considered, here's the guy that's delivered. He's sounds like maybe he's learned his lesson a little bit. And so that would be my bet today. I'd put a crisp 20 on it.
I disagree. I think he would actually be my last pick of the.
I'm shocked. I'm just hold on.
I think I would bet on Shorter. I think that would be my pick if I had to right now. Hamler might be right behind him. Isabella would be in the mix because of kick returner, which kind of I want to slide into that real quick here. That's a Bills camp mystery. We have no idea right now who's going to be returning kicks. Is it going to be Ty Johnson and Isabella? He could be in the mix. Maybe Hamler's in the mix. They drafted Daquan Hardy, the rookie from Penn State, in the 6th round. I don't even know if he returns kicks. I know he returns punts. I think he returns kicks. But there's who the hell is going to emerge as a kick returner in a year where kick returning might actually finally matter right now. So that's going to be not just a fun storyline to follow at camp, but it's also kind of it is a mystery. I will say Ty Johnson probably would be my pick right now because he's the safest and he's going to make the roster. But, man, I like Ty Johnson, but I'd like to see somebody maybe with a little more explosion become the kick returner.
Yeah, Ty Johnson is my pick today. My dark horse candidate is KJ Hamler, right? Because, again, does that give him the edge to be the 6th wide receiver or force them to keep 7 because he would be fulfilling that role? And I think it's something where, based on what he's done, he was dynamic as a kick returner in his time at Penn State. But too, Pat, this whole new setup on kick returns, I have no idea how this is going to play out, right? And
Me neither.
It's almost like with this, do you need a bigger, more physical kick returner type, right? I'm not saying you're going to see Keon Coleman out there, but does that become something where it's a Chase Claypool, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Someone that it's, again, you're talking from a shorter distance, you might no fair catches, right? So it's not just the safety piece and seeing how things set up, but you might have to kind of absorb some contact. Are they going to look for somebody that's a little bigger? But again, to your question, Ty Johnson would be my pick today.
Me too right now, but I hope it doesn't end up being their pick. But yeah, he's a guy who's going to not just be on the roster, but he's going to dress up on game day, even if he's not a kick returner. So I would say Ty Johnson as well. But still, we don't know. So it's going to be a fun mystery to track. Last one, this is something we've talked about before. This is another big mystery, and we may not even find it out so much at camp. Might have to kind of wait for some preseason games, but who the hell is calling the plays on defense? Is it going to be Sean McDermott? Is it going to be Bobby Babich, the new defensive coordinator? I don't really pay much attention to the coaches at camp. I never have, but this might be a first because I kind of want to see who's relaying calls in when they do 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s. Who's calling defensive plays? To me, that's an intriguing and important Bills mystery for training camp.
Bobby Babich will be calling plays. And I think this just Sean McDermott not tipping his hand. Like, listen, I'm not going to give anyone an excuse during this offseason to not be studying what our defense was last year. Because if he says that it's Bobby Babich, then they're going to look at things and know, like, okay, whatever tendencies they showed in the 2023 season, you can throw out the window because that's not going to happen. So Sean McDermott, competitive advantage. Let me not give them a handful of months to just be, not wasting their time on it. I don't think Bobby Babich would have just stayed if it was to, be defensive coordinator in title only. I could be wrong with this, but again, if I were a betting man, Bobby Babich is calling the plays.
You sound pretty confident in that. You're like ready to take one of those crisp $20 bills and throw it down. Oh.
Listen, man, you've heard enough from me this offseason. I am drinking the Bobby Babich Kool-Aid. I am in, and again, when you talk about what he has done with this defense and the positional groups that he's been in charge of in the past and kind of the energy that he's bringing to this, I am all in. So if you're all in, like, let's go.
I'll tell you this, man. I've said this before too. I'm high on Bobby Babich as well. And a lot of those players, current, former, talk to, they think he's going to be a head coach in the NFL in 2 to 3 years.
You can see it.
I'm not as confident in you or as you are that he's going to be calling plays. I could see a situation where McDermott calls plays until he still feels, I don't know, ready. It's just, maybe it's ego. I don't know what it is. I hope you're right. I'd like for you to be right for a lot of reasons, but not quite as confident in that. But yeah, man, we got some good Bills camp mysteries to look forward to. Before we get out of here, I want to ask you a couple other things real quick here. Not camp stuff necessarily, but Bulldog at WGR had a topic on the radio last week. I'm kind of piggybacking, or maybe you could call it stealing from what he asked. But he said this. He put this out there. He says, who's your favorite Bills player of all time? Not necessarily the greatest, just the favorite. Also, is it respectable for anyone over the age of 40, which you and I both are, to say Josh Allen? What's your thoughts, man?
Well, let me answer the second question first. Is it respectable if you're over the age of 40 to say Josh Allen? Absolutely.
Sure.
He is the most fun Buffalo Bill player I have ever watched with the football in his hands. And that is totally fine by me, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for folks that are in our age bracket that have been around long enough, that went through the drought and just, years of the team sending out a season ticket holder gift of Brian Moorman photo punting out of his own end zone, like, that's where you've come from. So if you want to embrace this thoroughbred golden retriever quarterback as your favorite player of all time, 1,000% that is fine.
Agreed.
He's not my choice, and I say that because it's Kyle Williams, which again, right, you think about what to that same point, like what you go through with the drought, kind of him being the blood, sweat, and tears of the Buffalo Bills. Anytime you even look back to some of those pregame speeches that he gave can still give you some goosebumps. And, Kyle Williams as a 5th round draft pick, a guy that they're going to play a 4-3. He's great. We're switching to a 3-4. He's still great. Like, there's no reason why he should be a fantastic NFL player, an all-pro, a Pro Bowler. And he was. And I thought he was the ultimate teammate, the ultimate leader. So for now, until Josh Allen leads the Bills to a Super Bowl, Kyle Williams will be my pick.
That's very fair. And I'll say this too. I'm going to be a jerk, and I'm going to pull like a little bit of a teaser. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow because I have a solo episode on my pod bag episode. I'm going to lock in with some detail, and I'm going to save my answer for tomorrow's show because I want to elaborate. I want to have some time to really elaborate on why I pick who I pick. So I'll save that for tomorrow. But Kyle Williams is a good one there. I like that. Speaking of Josh Allen, FanDuel, passing yards this year. If you want to throw down, we've been talking about gambling a lot. That's uncharacteristic of you and I on this show. Now, if you're going to take another crisp Marino $20 bill from the old wallet there, the over-under for yards for Josh Allen this year is just 3,750 right now on FanDuel. I looked it up because I had to be sure. Josh Allen has thrown for over 4,200 yards 4 straight seasons. and FanDuel's got him projected to throw like almost 450 yards less. I know this team wants to run the ball more and be a little balanced, but doesn't it feel kind of weird to you? Just 3,750 yards for Josh Allen over under?
It is so weird. And I I don't gamble, right? I mean, I'm like a fantasy football guy and that's it.
Sure.
So I don't, but I see this and I'm just like, it really has me scratching my head. And I'm a little bit of, at least when it comes to this in my older years, like, if it seems like too good to be true, it probably is type of piece. Like what is going on, right? Because what do they say? Vegas is never wrong type of thing. It seems so low. I mean, to think to yourself, just like, okay, hey, if they were going to have it around 4,000 yards, like, all right, that, you might be thinking to yourself a little bit different. You lose Diggs, you talk about running the ball more, but I mean, to basically go from almost 4,300 to 3,750 with it, that just seems really, really off. And I don't understand why. I'm not telling anyone to go out and do anything with your hard-earned money or this and that, but this one does not add up in any way, shape, or form.
No, it doesn't. And I get it. I guess maybe the thinking is they are going to really run the football a lot more. And God, I hate to even bring it up, but he's been so durable and he just doesn't miss games. Maybe they're like, well, he's due to finally get hurt and miss a few games. Because if he stays healthy, I do not see Josh Allen. I don't see a world where Josh Allen starts 17 games, regardless of who the receivers are, and he doesn't throw for $4,000, minimum $4,000. Hell, he might set records this year, man. I think this is a dude with a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove to the world that it was not, even if he's not saying this, that Stephon Diggs didn't make him, it was the other way around, even though they made each other. We all know that. But I kind of feel like he's got something to prove. There's no way in hell this dude is playing 17 games and not throwing for 3,800 yards. Come on.
It is a head scratcher to say the least. I still, and part of me expects it to creep up as you get closer and closer to the season, because I think you'll see more and more folks betting the over, and that line will still go up. But
for sure,
we'll see.
Last quick question here. I'm gonna let you go, man. Got any thoughts on what John Smith said about Buffalo last week? I actually thought it was hilarious. I love it. I'm here for it. I love rivalries. I love shit talking. He badmouthed Buffalo, called the worst city in the world, worst wings, blah, 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 this and that. But picked up a lot of traction, man. It got reported. And so, yeah, Joan from Queens and I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show. I wanted to know if you had any thoughts. Smith trashing the city of Buffalo. Any thoughts?
I'll be honest. I've been trying to stay off social media more and more these days. And, in some ways you feel like, gosh, should I make that change permanent? And, every so often you put some thought into that. I didn't even see it. I mean, I saw it like way after the fact, and it was just like, kind of the, the outrage over that type of stuff. Like people that know. And like, I don't know, who is Jonnu Smith even playing with right now? Like,
He's with Miami.
I'm not even quite sure. Right. So, you kind of go with that type of stuff. Guys are going to say stuff. Does it become a little fun? Yeah. Right. Like that's okay. But I spend about 4 seconds worrying about that type of stuff. If it was Tua Tagovailoa, okay, maybe I'll pay a little bit more attention to it because that's the face of the franchise and somebody that's going to,
right,
maybe make a big difference. Like when Tom Brady said some stuff about the hotels and visiting Buffalo in the past. Okay, like I get that. It's Tom Brady. You're the face of the NFL. Backup tight end. Like, good on you, man. Like, you have fun.
That would be the equivalent, let's just say, because he, it's a Miami guy talking about shit about Buffalo. It'd be the equivalent of like Jordan Phillips or Shaq Lawson saying a bunch of nasty shit about Miami. I'm like, who cares? And I like it. Again, I'm all for it. If Josh Allen talks like that, and he's not going to, but if he did, yeah, sure, you take notice, just like you said with Tua. Nobody cares. I just think it's funny. I love rivalries, and if you're going to have a rivalry, that means you hate each other. And if you hate each other, it means you're going to talk some shit about each other. I love it, man. I thought it was really real good. But anyway, all right, that's going to do it.
Listen, if he was trashing, Pat Moran's rankings of wing spots, then I would take it personally. But
he trash wings.
I know that's what I'm saying. But like, I'm just saying, in general. So I was just giving a plug to your to your peers, man.
He called wings buffalo wings. If you call wings buffalo wings, I'm not going to take you serious. They're wings. They're not buffalo wings. They're wings, at least in Buffalo anyway. So if you're going to dress buffalo in the wings, at least get that part right. But anyway, all right, that's going to do it for this show. Make sure you follow my guy Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Marino. Dude, guess what? Well, actually, technically next week there still won't be one more show, and then we'll actually have some camp stuff that we could actually talk about, some developments. I'm sure that'll be coming. But it's always fun having you on, bud.
Looking forward to it, man.
All right, guys, I'll be back with a pod bag episode. And speaking of wings, I'm going to have a wing review of Maine and Hamlin. That's also going to be on the show tomorrow. Talk to you then.